Please come in. You're right on time. The door only opens when the clock strikes midnight. Georgia and Hannah are preparing to broadcast from the belfry. Just like this old bell tower, they have many stories to tell. Some old and some new. Follow me up these stairs, but mind your step. Ah, they're waiting for you.
So, I just wanted to begin by saying you're going to notice a lot of common themes here.
Yay!
You're going to notice a lot of common themes.
I love a common theme.
I really tried to stay close to my side of the vampire research. And basically, there was so much that you said and talked about that I was like, fuck. God,
no.
like, fuck. Like, what am I going to talk about? I'm just going to say it anyway. There's quite a bit. And I also wanted to preemptively say, I apologize for not being able to pronounce like any of this.
Hell yeah. Well, I couldn't even pronounce any fucking English words correctly without going into a weird British pronunciation or just like speaking properly. So
It's true.
It's fine.
True. So I'm just going to talk about various folklore throughout mostly Southeast Asia and the Southeast Asian islands, Malaysia.
Hell yeah. Are you going to talk about the Aswang?
Am I? I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
In the Philippines?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
Never mind.
I did intend to, but there was a lot. And I would love to have a discussion about all of these vampiric themes at the end of this episode. I wrote quite a few notes just talking about women and how they're treated. And
hell yeah.
Especially resurrection and treatment of the dead, which we talked about at not really the top of the last episode. That was more like we were just talking about it kind of thing.
It's probably going to be in a tangent episode somewhere.
Sure. Oh, that's right. I did want to first mention. Hold, please. I have to find the link. Here we go. So Georgia and I have been on kind of a weird manifestation kick.
Oh, storytelling. Yeah.
Of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And how we as people, as women, tend to be storytellers. We keep up with oral tradition, mostly within our own culture, within our own bubbles. But in doing this podcast, we are carrying on oral traditions for all kinds of different things, telling the stories of those who were wrongly accused and supposedly killed a bunch of people, but probably super didn't. And
same.
Just talking about, not the typical folk tales that you hear when you're growing up living in the Midwestern United States.
The anthropology in us.
Yes. Or at least as a white person living in the Midwestern United States.
Right.
Let me clarify.
Especially as a person who didn't actually grow up in the United States.
There you go. So I do believe in this whole concept of like, once you start to notice something, or once you start thinking about something a little bit more, you start to notice it more and more throughout your life. For example, if you notice one morning, wow, I'm seeing a lot of huge red trucks. What's with all these huge red trucks? Chances are throughout the day, you're going to notice every huge fucking red truck.
The teal equinox.
The teal equinox, for example. Shitty Honda CR-V drivers, for example. Once you see enough, you start to notice all of them. A few days ago, I was scrolling the TikTok, as one does, and I came across a clip of the Minnesota NPR series that they do called Native News, where an author came on and talked about how in Ojibwe tradition, snow on the ground means that it's sacred storytelling season. that winter is traditionally a time for the Ojibwe people to tell sacred stories. It's a time for reflection and reminding each other of their histories, their ancestral histories. And so, yeah, I don't want to say like, oh, it feels good to connect with that because that's an entirely different level of storytelling. But it's like this theme of storytelling that we are so fixated on isn't just in our heads. It's something that's been happening with people for a very long time.
It was also just serendipitous that you sent that, because like when we had our first podcast meeting, you couldn't fucking go anywhere because of the weather. And like, you know,
I couldn't get into my car. It was great. Because my key bent because the lock was frozen.
And I think it's like, yeah, when you start to notice things, you see them more often, or when you think about something, you notice them more often. But I think this has been a step beyond that, because I don't know, like I've always thought about storytelling fairly more proactively than most people probably do, because my mom hardcore identifies as a storyteller, and like storytelling is such a big deal in anthropology. And so like if something storytelling related comes up, it's something that I would usually notice. And the fact that in the last month since we embarked on this adventure together, it's been like
a month since you asked me to join,
popping up, literally one exact month. It's like popping up all over the place. It's just so weird. It feels really validating. Also, I was reading my Coven Book Club book. I texted you about this. I'm reading this book and I see this name and I'm like, oh, it's Oberon. And I'm like, well, there can't be too many people in the world named Oberon, especially in this type of community, but also it's that type of community. So maybe. And then I kept reading and it talks about like the Gray School of Wizardry. And I'm like, wait a second. My mom used to write courses for Gray School about like herbalism and astrology. So then I was like, this is the Oberon that my mom knows. And she said that he's real weird now. So take that with a grain. I mean, he's like 80, but she said, one of the quotes in the book that he said is that storytelling is one of the oldest forms of magic. And I was like, oh my God, like, even if you like take the realism of magic out of it and just think about like things that you describe as magic on a day-to-day basis, like storytelling is definitely it. And I texted my mom about all of this and she was like, storytelling is like such a shamanic like practice. I don't know. And I was just like, I don't know. We had a whole conversation about it too. And I was just sitting there like, oh my God.
What a Western word for that, shamanic.
Yeah.
The shaman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's applicable to a lot of different.
It's just another label.
Yeah.
Honestly, just like sorcerer, magic man.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's like that Doctor Who episode, to go back to Doctor Who again, the Shakespeare one about like words are magic, and like going back to my word of the year last year, intention, using words with intention, how that correlates with like, I mean, in contemporary witchcraft practices, like what you speak has meaning and power, and like everything is about your will and your intention. So whether you believe in that or not, like, doesn't matter. It's still relevant for anyone. Like what you speak matters and your will matters.
I think intention has a lot of power for the self, whereas action has a lot of power for others. And if you can combine the two, magic.
Shut the fuck up.
What do you mean?
Yeah, I know. I'm telling you to shut the fuck up because you're like saying things that make sense.
I'm trying to be insightful here.
I know.
Trying to think about the power that we have as people. Because in the grand scheme of things, collectively, yes, we have a lot of power, especially when it comes to storytelling.
I'm gonna roll my power. 45. That's probably okay.
I don't have my dice near me. What was I saying? Oh yeah, collectively we have a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a group we are mighty, we can make change. Individually, really not so much. However, if you're a storyteller, boy, it's like you become one of many. You become the people. You have all of the power.
Not to keep bringing things back to Doctor Who, but you know what I'm going to say? When Martha goes on her journey and they're like, oh, what's this weapon that you talk about?
Mm-hmm.
And she literally just tells everyone at this time on this day, like, just think of the Doctor. And then he gets all of his,
Yeah.
But that uses that power of like, or that concept of like tapping into the collective conscious and like just the power of what she did. That's literally what she said. I told a story.
Yeah. Powerful. Yeah. When we all come together and band together and to learn and help each other, it's great. When we all come together, band up to fucking shit on one another and bully each other into oblivion, it's a bad time.
Thanks for coming to our TED Talk.
Yeah. Don't bully each other like Georgia and I do to one another. Don't ignore that. That's not real.
So only because I don't know how to show affection.
It's fine. I'm fine. I'm not living in agony every day.
If I ever actually hugged you, you'd probably just die. Like, this is fucking weird. Stop it.
I thought about it the other day, and I had a brain fart. Like my brain went to. Do you remember when TVs would have like the colored bars?
Fuck yeah.
It did that.
It was like we're experiencing technical difficulties.
Exactly. I was like, okay, so I don't think that I'm gonna talk about as much as you did in the last episode, that's for sure. I certainly have a lot to share, but I also really want to have a lot of discussion about the recurring themes.
Well, that's fine. Because I feel like I just info dumped, and then you're going to info dump a little bit more, and then we can get into a real actual discussion about things.
Right. I tried to find for these, what I'm going to say, Eastern vampires.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to find as much as I could. But really, it seems like everything, once again, just comes from like 6th century fucking folklore, and writings have been lost, or these oral traditions have changed through time as they do. And I think at one point I'll talk about like how the description of this one being changed from one thing to another just based on modern depictions of vampires and the explosion of vampirism in modern media in the 1980s.
Fright Night.
I'm going to talk about the Chinese hopping vampire.
Cool.
Or the Jiangxi. Once again, I'm going to say I apologize for not being able to pronounce shit. I actually tried really hard with Google Translate and like repeated several times.
Can I just talk about how my best friend just had a baby? That's it.
Oh, don't worry. We're gonna get into the
more babies.
Yep, we're definitely gonna talk about babies. Okay, so the Jiangxi, also known as the Chinese hopping vampire, it's most commonly depicted as a stiff corpse dressed in like sort of official funerary garments from the Qing dynasty. Because it is a corpse, a reanimated corpse, it has very pale skin, long white hair, and some sources I found said that they are completely blind but can detect breathing.
Gross.
And they can either be completely decomposed, like rotting flesh off of the skeleton, or they look like a fresh corpse. So it really kind of varies in your corpse looking thing. They like to hide in coffins or dark places during the day, and then they go out at night and hop around, killing living things to absorb their ki or life force, as opposed to blood, but that could also kind of insinuate blood because it is life force, as we talked in the last episode. It's the four humors, or whatever the fuck it was.
Blood is the funniest.
Blood is the funniest.
Are you gonna talk more about their hopping? I need to know.
Oh, absolutely. There's
Okay, good.
actually 100% a reason why they're thought to hop around. So
Is it because they have one copper leg?
no. The origins of this, the supposed origins of these creatures was originally written in the Qing Dynasty as well. Okay, so people tended to travel long distances for work because there was a lot of rural living in China. It's a fucking massive country.
Giant.
It's huge. And there was always work all over, all different kinds of things to do in a millennia ago. So when someone dies far from home, they need to be transported back home to be buried. So it was written that a priest would reanimate the corpse in order to bring it back instead of like carrying it the whole way, and would transport it at night by teaching it to hop and
like
follow it along the entire way home.
Why did it have to hop? Why couldn't it just walk?
Because it's stiff. It's a stiff corpse.
Oh, so it's not like hopping on one foot. It's just kind of like jumping a little bit.
Fully T-pose, hopping up and down.
Like
such.
turnip head. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Just picture that, if you will.
Yeah, I will. For the rest of this episode, it's just a turnip head.
And the priest that reanimates the corpse follows along and rings a little bell to kind of notify people that this is happening. So no one comes near. It was seen as improper or disgusting to go near a corpse, a reanimated corpse.
But it's not disgusting to marry them. That's a different story, though.
Yes.
In China.
It's entirely different. So this was called, and this is where I'm going to butcher it, Shangxi Ganshi, or exorcism in Shangxi, which is a place. In Shangxi, people left their homes frequently to work elsewhere because it was in the middle of nowhere. And then after death, their bodies would be transported back because it was believed their souls would feel homesick if they were buried somewhere unfamiliar to them. I can understand that.
Yeah, that's a vibe.
Kinda. The corpses would be arranged upright in single file and be tied to long bamboo rods on their sides, while two men, one at the front and one at the back, would carry the ends of the rods on their shoulders and walk. When the bamboo flexed, it looked like they were hopping.
Oh.
So that is one.
That's so cool.
Yeah. There is also a publication I found called The Corpse Walker, Real Life Stories, China from the Bottom Up by Liao Yiwu, which I do recommend to you or literally anyone who listens to this. It's a fantastic book. I read several stories. It's a compilation of conversations that the author had with various members of Chinese society. He was really interested in speaking with the people who like made up the backbone of society. So he talked to people who dug shit all day out of
the working class and
working class. But he also interviewed retired military officers, or a retired military officer. Internet Archive, baby. That's where it's at.
Your mom's where it's at.
Mom's where it's at. But the author was unsure if he's still alive, was unfortunately violently affected by the oppressive Chinese government in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. His mother and father and grandparents and him, he was sent to prison for 4 years for speaking out against the government, and actually wrote some of this book or had some of these conversations when he was in prison. So there are things, the Feng Shui master, that was a really interesting one, talking about why is energy and your home so important, and how does it affect our daily lives, or at least what does this person think that it does.
Mm-hmm.
The illegal border crosser, I did not read that one, but that I read a brief description at the top of the chapter about how and why this person illegally crossed the border out of China. Can't even imagine going through that kind of hell.
Mm-hmm.
And the one I will talk about is titled The Corpse Walkers. So the interviewee that Liao was talking to was a young man. I even think that he might have been like a teenager, walking with one of his friends when he encountered a corpse walking alongside him on the road. They had a big black robe, hulking, wore a straw hat and a white paper funeral mask. And when he looked a little bit closer, he actually saw that this corpse was walking on its own behind another man. I also thought it was interesting. The man who was walking in front of the corpse was chanting "Yo ho, yo ho."
He's a pirate. Okay.
A pirate's life for him, I guess.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly why he was chanting that, but that was just one thing that he witnessed or observed.
Maybe he didn't have a bell.
Or maybe he didn't have a bell. But one thing I immediately found interesting was that the interviewee noticed this in the middle of the fucking day. I had literally just read all of this information about how the Jiangxi and these corpse walkers moved at night, so that regular folk didn't have to interact with a dead body or multiple dead bodies. Eventually, the interviewee and his friend followed the corpse and this man all the way to an inn where they tried to convince the innkeeper into explaining, like, what the hell is up with this corpse. You need to tell us what's going on here or we're going to report you to the authorities, which in 1960s was a very serious threat.
Yeah.
And essentially, there is another man inside the big black robe coat situation holding up the corpse while the first man walks ahead to guide.
Oh no.
And the innkeeper tried to describe it as like guiding the dead into the afterlife, when it was very likely just guiding this man who couldn't see because he was covered in a big fucking robe holding a dead body. Really interesting. That is a very interesting and modern encounter with a corpse walker.
Kind of reminds me, like, the thing with the bell and like not seeing them kind of reminds me a little bit of the night marchers in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, those are kind of ghosts theoretically, but it's like that same idea that you cannot look at them because then you'll be like haunted, and it's like a bad omen to look at them. But I mean, I think in a lot of societies it's probably bad luck or a bad omen or whatever to look at the dead, which is kind of funny since we started tonight talking about how in Western society we embalm corpses and then put them on display for everyone to look at.
Yeah, and do nothing but look at them and revere them.
Like, what the fuck?
Well, from what I've read about the dead, at least in Chinese folklore, the dead were revered like Anglo-American culture does now.
Yeah.
I think the dead weren't necessarily seen as something cursed or taboo, but it's more like the afflictions that they had or the reasons that they died were the cause for these curses or these transformations into terrible creatures, which I was going to talk about how a Jiangxi becomes a thing. Obviously, Jiangxi stem from like a very real thing of transporting corpses across space.
Right.
But as we mentioned in the last episode, some things become sensationalized because we don't understand them. And so we need to Come up with a fun reason, because humans are funny.
So funny, so fun, so quirky.
And random. So freaking quirky, aren't we? Methods for corpse reanimation, which, as I mentioned before, was how these Jiangxi became, how they were able to hop around as they were reanimated. Different methods were described in the Yue Wei. I'm not even gonna. Were described in the Shadow Book of Ji Yun.
Cool.
Which was compiled between 1789 and 1798. Either a recently deceased person returned to life, or from a corpse that was buried for a long time that just never decomposed somehow. Some mentioned methods are using magic to resurrect the dead, or a spirit possessing a corpse, usually a nefarious one, like a demon. Again, I'm using all English words here because I don't speak.
Why not?
I'm so dumb. I'm so dumb. I can't. I can barely speak English.
God.
Have you listened to me talk? Anyway.
Literally.
So, some evil spirit possessing a corpse. And then the corpse absorbs ki to kind of completely resurrect. Another explanation is references the idea of the 3 Huns and 7 Poes. That references the Chinese philosophy of the spirit and how a person exists and exists on the earth with kind of a mixed bag of spirits inside of them. Essentially, Hun is good, Po is bad. And with the Jiangxi, the Hun, which is the good, leaves the body, but the Po remains, leaving the corpse to keep existing around. And I could honestly talk about the Huns and Poes for an entire episode. Chinese philosophy of spirit is intense and very daunting. But I'm going to continue on because I have a lot to talk about. Another cause is that a dead person, if they're not buried after the funeral, it just continues on, I don't want to say living, but it continues letting out energy. And it could also be struck by lightning, or a black cat jumps across the coffin and brings it back to life.
Hell yeah. Cat, get in here, do some work.
Yeah. The least frequent cause for a Jiangxi becoming what it is, or a corpse resurrecting, is that someone's soul sticks around due to improper death. So that includes like suicide or just like a really
traumatic accident.
Is a really interesting theme in folklore that if you die in a bad way, you come back in a bad way.
Yeah, which is totally not fair because it is not your fault.
Yeah, you mentioned in the last episode, or we talked about how like becoming a vampire is a punishment, or becoming a Jiangxi, whatever, is punishment for suicide or a cursed death, and how by you doing something cursed, you receive that energy back, and you get fucked. You get the bad end of the deal. I want to know why that is.
This is not related, but going back to what you said a minute ago reminded me, there's a story, it's called The Dark Brotherhood.
Skyrim?
This podcast I listen to calls it the 7 Deadly Poes because it's basically like a bunch of Edgar Allan Poe copies, that form the Dark Brotherhood.
Okay.
Getting up to mischief, and like that's just where my mind went. So
when I was talking about that,
yeah,
I was wondering why you looked distracted for a moment.
I had to look up what the story was called. The Dark Brotherhood. Everyone go check it out and laugh.
Yeah. But I wanted to briefly talk about like our concept of spirit or soul.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of the idea that like more so the traumatic accident thing, but you know, if there's like a lot of a certain kind of energy, that's where ghosts come from. You know what I mean? Like, oh, something bad happened here, so like that energy remains like in ghost form, or like the building is haunted because something really bad happened here, or there was a really bad accident or something like that.
It's not exactly karma, but it's akin to that.
Yep.
Do you have any concept of the soul? Do you think about having a soul? I think
Man,
about
I don't
that.
know, man.
I don't really think about having a spirit either. I don't think about that frequently. I'm just trying to stay breathing every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I've started thinking about things like that, on my year of
Existentialism.
self-discovery with my therapist.
Yeah, existentialism. Yeah, for sure.
Uh-huh.
I think that like the concept of the soul is something that I talked a lot about as a youth, as being a member of the Christian faith.
Yeah. See, and I've never been a part of any organized religion or anything like that, so I don't think I was ever forced to think about it. It's just like something that pops up on my own. Although it kind of does remind me of that question that I asked you guys a while back, where I was like, where do you live inside your body?
Oh
Like
yeah,
that might be your consciousness, but some people might interpret that as like their soul.
I think I've talked before about how I exist like kind of like back here,
Yeah.
and I'm like
Yeah.
kind of viewing through me. I know you can't see my hand right now, but Georgia can. It's like pushing forward.
Yeah. And like I exist right behind my eyes,
Yeah,
which is also where my migraines come from. And
yeah,
also when I get really stressed out and have anxiety headaches.
yeah. It's all right there. That's where you exist. That's a little tiny.
Yeah. And Shannon is always like, I know you live inside your head. I know you live inside your head. And I'm like, why would you think that? And then I'm like, oh yeah, I live behind my eyes. And I'm like, well, fuck off.
You look behind your eyes.
I live behind my eyes.
Oh, you said you look behind your eyes.
Okay. Same thing.
Imagine if you could do that. If you just turn your eyes backward and you can see behind. All right, fucking SpongeBob. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, concept of the soul. So in Christianity, there's that whole idea of like your soul is never ending. You end up in heaven, and it's not cyclical. It's very linear. You live, you die,
Mm-hmm.
you live again, but now you get to live in heaven
Yeah.
forever. It's very beginning and end, but it's like an eternal
Yeah.
end. Whereas I feel like a lot of what I'm interested in is the more cyclical idea of
Yeah.
the soul or the spirit, that you continue to energize the world
Yeah.
by living on.
I really like the idea of past lives. I'm not gonna lie.
Right.
The concept of past lives is fascinating to
It's
me.
awesome.
I would love to do a past life regression sometime just to see what it's like. I really want to, just to see what it's like.
You need to deal with some other traumas first, I think.
Listen, you don't know me.
Okay.
But also, I think even if you're not religious, I think one of the most beautiful concepts is that idea that matter can't be created or destroyed. And so, like, whatever matter comprises your physical body is one day gonna break down a lot sooner if you don't get fucking embalmed.
Mhm.
And then you're gonna, like, that matter will go on to exist in a different way somehow, and that in itself is cyclical as well.
It's like the world will synthesize something new out of you
Yeah.
and the world you live in now. You are going to become a fart. I don't know.
Well, I for sure am.
Poop particles. That's what you'll be.
Yeah, and I'll be causing someone pink eye because I'm a petty bitch.
But so in this case with the Jiangxi, the corpse returns to life just to be, or originally, just to be transported back home to be buried. But the mythological creature, of course, which is where my interest in this originated,
Mm-hmm.
is that it's kind of like a vampire. It's been sensationalized and definitely drift towards like the more vampiric qualities that you talked about in the last episode, like drinking blood, which historically the Jiangxi did not do. It absorbed the life force.
Mm-hmm.
And things like going or not being able to go out during the day. That's obviously something that
Yeah.
already existed with the Jiangxi. Being able or getting stabbed with a wooden stake. I'm going to talk about that when I get to the
Hell yeah.
literature and media section here. But so how do we keep a Jiangxi away? How do the people of China deter a Jiangxi, which some folks are still mildly concerned about? So a mirror can be used because the Jiangxi are scared of their own reflection. It's not like a vampire where they can't be seen in their reflection. They're just scared of being able to see themselves, probably because they're ugly, because they're a fucking corpse.
That was common in some of the stuff that I was reading too. It's not necessarily that they couldn't be seen in their reflection, but like they wouldn't want to look at themselves for one reason or another because they're abomination or whatever. There's also something to do with like until modern times, mirrors were backed in silver, and silver, like silver bullets kill werewolves, like that same concept that like silver harmed vampires too, and I can't remember exactly what it is. So technically speaking, today a vampire would have a reflection because they're not backed in silver anymore.
I mean, that tracks. Where I found this information was in a publication called Ben Kao Gangmu by Li Shizhen, published in 1596.
Hell yeah.
Compiled in 1596. Long time ago. Here we go. A fucking old ass oral tradition. Items made from a peach tree's wood can be used to subjugate evil auras and deter evil spirits, from a compilation called Jingchu Suishiji. Original text was lost. The original compilation of oral traditions was also lost, and was thought to have originated but sometime between the early 6th and early 8th centuries. So anywhere in there. Once again, from Zibu Yu by Yuan Mei, put together in 1788, a rooster's call can deter a Jiangxi. Evil spirits withdraw when they hear roosters crawl because the call usually occurs with the rising sun.
What about a rooster sneeze like that TikTok that I sent you last night?
Anyway, I actually really want to read this book.
So cute.
It contains a lot of really fun things about the supernatural and like Chinese folklore. I really just kind of read a brief synopsis and then found this occurrence about the rooster call. They also talk about using like jujube seeds and fire to deter a Jiangxi in that same book.
I think fire would deter most things, honestly.
Yeah. No shit. Especially if the thing can only like hop around. I don't remember exactly why jujube seeds affected it. It may have something to do with like
they're not going to be counting them.
Oh, maybe that's it.
Because I know in China, I think it was obvious. Well, it was rice that was usually that, but like I know globally it's rice or grains or seeds. So
some other things include hooves of a black donkey, as told in Ghost Blows Out the Light by Zhang Muye in 2006. And coroners in eastern Fujian have said that vinegar will also do it. Now, they do deal with the dead, so maybe there's something to be told there. And other sort of random objects. Like,
yeah.
The Jiangxi really became popular in the 1980s and the 1990s. There was a huge wave of vampire films and TV shows released out of Hong Kong, and they usually featured just vampires, but there were a few that featured Jiangxi as like sole character or creature or antagonist, or they were seen alongside vampires, not so much like either or. Encounters of the Spooky Kind and Mr. Vampire were a couple of the early hits. And I think personally that's what I believe is when the fascination with Jiangxi the connection between Jiangxi and vampires really kind of hit it off, since they were always sort of seen as like these energy sucking things. They became more associated with the blood sucking and the murder.
It's metaphorical, blood, life force, exactly. Same thing.
And so if you think that supernatural can get really ridiculous with with their portrayal of supernatural creatures. You really got to watch one of these films. It's wild. It is wild.
Hell yeah.
Apparently, I found out on this fucking research venture, there was or is a Kung Fu Panda TV show. Did you know about that?
I think so, yeah.
I had no idea. I fucking love Kung Fu Panda.
Does Kung Fu Panda fight a vampire?
Oh, Jiangxi was featured in an episode.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I will definitely be binging that show sometimes. Now that I know it exists. I fucking love Kung Fu Panda. Are you kidding? The Jiangxi are also featured in video games such as Phantom Fighter, Super Mario Land, Castlevania, Soma, and Overwatch. If you know anything about Overwatch, you can apply...
Not really. Like a little bit.
You can apply like skins to your hero. And at one point during like a Halloween event, there was a skin that you could give one of the heroes called Mei, where she would dress as a Jiangxi and hop up and down as like an emote. And last but not least, I wanted to share that there is a tabletop role-playing game about the Jiangxi titled Jiangxi: Blood in the Banquet Hall, where players act as an immigrant Chinese family running a restaurant in 1920s America. And by day, they run the restaurant. By night, they fight vampires.
That sounds so wholesome.
It won a couple of awards.
Hell
it is
yeah.
apparently a really wonderful and easy to play tabletop role-playing game, and it also discusses themes of racism in America.
Hell yeah.
Which is good. We could use some more tabletop role-playing games that address racism and not just like dwarves and elves.
Yeah.
Or mythical creatures.
Yeah. Or like, yeah. Never mind. I don't want to go on a tangent about racism in D&D.
I know, we could talk about that for a while.
Yeah.
So that is the Jiangxi. That is one sort of realm, one sort of genre of East Asian vampire or vampire adjacent thing. They're probably the most well-known in Western media in terms of vampire adjacent creatures. But next I'm going to talk about some Malaysian mythological creatures and their whole deal. So in our first episode, you talked about a headless horseman.
Sure
How
did.
would you like to learn about some disembodied heads?
I fucking love disembodied heads.
Just to shake things up.
Listen, I could do a whole episode on the screaming skulls just from the one county where I grew up in England. So hit me with some disembodied heads.
Well, first I'm going to talk about the not disembodied head, but they're all sort of like...
Yes, that's fine.
Connected with one another, these next things I'm going to talk about. So the Pontianak, a Malay mythological creature, was derived from myths and legends of the Kalimantan, I think is how you pronounce it, where essentially the ghost of a stillborn child takes the form of a pregnant woman with a child still inside of its womb. So
wait, what?
So it originates from it is the ghost of a stillborn child that is able to shapeshift into the form of a pregnant woman.
Okay. Yep.
Or a woman with a stillborn child. This spirit takes the form of a long-haired woman dressed in white who lures unsuspecting men in to enact revenge for their evil deeds, to suck their blood and incite ravenous fear. She is an astral female spirit, and
yes, she is
also depicted with long, sharp fangs and long, sharp fingernails. Who does that sound like to you? This kind of spirit, long hair, dressed in white, lures men. The woman in white, right?
Yeah. Which is like prevalent. Was that the very first episode of Supernatural ever?
Yeah. La Llorona.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's like one of those in every culture, everywhere.
She is described as I'm probably gonna be switching back and forth between it and she, because it technically is an it, but is usually shapeshifts into a
female presenting.
Yeah. Thank you. and she is usually described as like vampiric female spirit. Her whole
because
deal
women are the root of all
is
evil. Yes,
vengeance, essentially.
Same. Yeah.
She is very bloodthirsty and absolutely wishes to harm people, mostly men. And some depictions, she turns into a more monstrous form, like with like insane fangs and long fingernails. She only appears during a full moon, and you'll know she's around when you can hear a baby crying or a woman laughing. If the sounds that you hear are loud, she's far away. If the sounds are quiet, she is very nearby.
The Aswang in the Philippines is like that
Yep.
too. Yeah. And also female presenting.
Yep. She can locate prey by the scent of clean laundry. So there is a rural tradition to not leave clean laundry out, hanging out overnight, for fear that you might attract.
That just seems like this whole thing is established so that people do their laundry in a timely fashion.
Yeah, that's the whole deal, for sure.
It's propaganda.
For sure. She's also thought to be attracted by the scent of blood. So maybe just like strong human scent or evidence of the human existence.
Does she lure children away by any chance?
There's a different thing that I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
That absolutely does fuck with children. But specifically, the Pontianak does not.
This sounded familiar, but I'll tell you why later.
So it kills its victims by removing their internal organs and eviscerating the fuck out of the men. And she will,
hell yeah.
If you are looking at her, she'll suck your eyeballs out of your head.
Oh.
Yeah, isn't that a lot of fun?
That's cute, yeah.
So it is named the Pontianak, and actually there is a capital city in Borneo, all of Malaysia. It's named after this spirit because that capital city has such a rich history of the supernatural and was basically founded on a land of ghosts, like evil spirits that tried very hard to deter people from living there.
It's so cool. The eyeball thing also reminds me of, like, again, not looking. You can't look at the dead.
Exactly.
You can't look at.
It's a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
It is similar to the kuntilanak in Indonesia, which is essentially the same in folklore from what I could find.
Mm-hmm. I think I read about those I think I saw about those when I was doing my research too. I just skimmed over them because I was like, nope, Hannah might talk about this.
Yeah. In a novel by William Skeet called Malay Magic.
Dumb name.
He talked about what the hell is it? The Pontianak. He also talked about another Malaysian mythological creature that I will talk about next. But and also that an encyclopedia full of religion and ethics, I'm using air quotes here, that was published between like 1902 and 1908, talks about the kuntilanak. I'm really sorry if I'm saying that wrong, which appears as a bird and sucks the blood from virgins and young women.
Like the Strigas.
Yeah. It is controlled through black magic to make women fall ill, specifically through menstruation and all kinds of vaginal bleeding. Yeah. And the Pontianak and the kuntilanak, as they're attracted to the scent of blood, traditionally, there's a lot of blood when you're menstruating or when you're giving birth. There's a wonderful theme here. In what I could read, there wasn't really that strong of a connection to like the Western vampire, at least in like the English translations of what I could find.
I'm wondering if there's something to do with just like mortality rates of giving birth historically, and just, oftentimes mythologies and legends and folklore explain things that you cannot scientifically explain, and historically people didn't really know why. It's only in the last 200 years that we know why mortality rates when giving birth are so high.
Why we still haven't fixed it, I don't fucking know.
Yeah, Joseph Lister tried his hardest, but but
I think that's a really good point because, as humans, we just come up with reasons for things that we don't understand.
yeah, and so many of these are about like babies, pregnant women, fertility, miscarriages. So it's like, oh, well, there has to be a demon.
Mm-hmm. Like the whole origin of the Pontianak is that it's a stillborn child that takes the form of a pregnant woman.
Yeah.
So before I talk about the next thing, I did want to mention that this is not found in the show Supernatural, but it's actually found in one of the Supernatural novels. I didn't even try to look it up, to be honest with you. I knew that.
Have you read those?
No, fuck no.
Okay.
I just know that shit is going to be terrible. So now,
might have judged you if you would have said yes.
I'm going to talk about the Langsuir.
Okay.
Langsuir or Langsuir. Lang.
Okay.
Suir. It's very similar to the Pontianak, and it's actually considered somewhat directly connected, as the Langsuir is the ghost of a woman who died while pregnant or during childbirth.
Mm-hmm.
And people believe that the Pontianak is the ghost of that woman's child and that they are directly connected. They,
okay,
become real together. Also depicted with long black hair, or depicted as a floating head.
Yes.
With entrails, like a big long, like
just like intestines hanging 100%.
Out. And a hanging spinal column. When she has full body, she has very long nails and wears green robes to cover up her sort of.
Oh, green, huh? Her lack of body, her entrails?
No, her body is like so thin and like.
Okay, skeletal.
Walter William Skeet, an English anthropologist, visited Malaysia, and he published a series of books of his, which I mentioned before, that one book, Malay Magic. He compiled his interpretations of these stories that he heard, including those he considered to be the most, and I'm definitely using like weighted air quotes, magical.
Mm-hmm.
That book specifically was published in the year 1900. So I'm going to read exactly what was written. The original Langsuir, whose embodiment is supposed to be a kind of night owl, is described as being a woman of dazzling beauty who died from the shock of hearing that her child was stillborn and had taken the shape of the Pontianak.
Mm-hmm.
On hearing this terrible news, she clapped her hands and without further warning, flew whinnying away to a tree upon which she perched. She may be known by her robe of green, by her tapering nails of extraordinary length, parentheses, a mark of beauty, gag, and by the long jet black tresses which she allows to fall down to her ankles. Only, alas, for the truth must be told, in order to conceal the hole in the back of her neck through which she sucks the blood of children. These vampire-like proclivities of hers may, however, be successfully combated if the right means are adopted. For if you are able to catch her, cut short her nails and luxuriant tresses, and stuff them into the hole in her neck, she will become tame and indistinguishable from an ordinary woman, remaining so for years. Cases have been known, indeed, in which she has become a wife and a mother, until she was allowed to dance at a village merrymaking, when she at once reverted to her ghostly form and flew off into the dark and gloomy forest from whence she came.
Oh, so when she didn't do something that was good and womanly, she turned back into a demon. Yeah. It's weird.
It's crazy. When she just wanted to dance and when she wanted to have a good time, she was fucking punished.
That's so rude too. Cut off her hair and shove it in her hole.
I'm saying.
What the fuck?
How?
It's still giving me big A Swang energy because like she has long hair down to her, except her feet are on backwards, which like get your shit together, girl. I don't know, but like the long fingernails and everything. And the
I know. She's just
the blood
she's
straw.
horribly upset that her child has either died inside of her or died during childbirth.
And wants to have a good time and forget about it. Who doesn't want to have a good time and put that trauma behind you?
So she becomes a spirit and sucks the blood of children.
Fuck you, patriarchy.
Langsuirs are known to have a deep connection to the natural world around them, being as they're associated with nocturnal predator birds such as owls, and they are found hunched in certain trees. Don't know why I wrote that. It's got to be the kind of tree was written in a language that I can't read, and so I just wrote certain trees. Or perched upon pregnant women's roofs, waiting for them to give birth so she can eat the babies.
Yeah, have a little snack. Yeah,
but they don't turn into a bird to fly around. They just they take off in human form and like fly around, or they float around like just the head with the entrails and the spinal column.
That's a power move, I'm saying.
I know you want to be that so bad.
I kind of really do.
How you can repel a Langsuir from inhabiting a dead woman's corpse. So like that would be the spirit if it were to spread, whatever, is by putting glass beads in her mouth, a hen's egg under the armpits, and needles in her palms. This prevents her from opening her mouth, waving her arms, or closing her hands while flying as a bird. This is female oppression.
I love it. It sure is.
Literally clipping her wings.
Oh my god.
Preventing
with an egg
infanticide. You know, keeping those birthing rates up at any cost. It may kill the
girls
mom.
Girls just want to have fun, man.
Girls just want to have fun.
God damn it. Wait, hold on. Yeah. I have drank my whole second water bottle.
I'm so proud.
And I had like almost a whole 64-ounce fucking essential water thing at work this afternoon too.
Hell yes.
This is the most hydrated I've been in years.
I do actually have, hold on, I have a link here that takes me to web.archive.org. Highly recommend. All information should be free. Where people talk about how they are afraid of the Langsuir coming to their village, and how a man traps the Langsuir. I think I'm pretty sure he uses magnets, but I could be wrong. That could be something else. No, he trapped it in a jar. A spiritual shaman, Ramli Yusuf, 41, claimed to have seized 4 Langsuirs after the residents report sightings of the supernatural creature recently. This was published in November 2013. Very recent. Very, very recent. He caught 2 of them in one area and 2 of them in another area of the village. He did this by reciting verses of the Quran, and they were bound together in a special place before being deported to its native origin. And there's images too.
Okay.
But basically, it's just what looks to be like a shrunken head in a jar.
Cute.
Interesting. It's great. People are still afraid of them. From what I could read, it's mostly because people are afraid of their pregnant family members losing their newborns or dying and becoming Langsuirs.
Yeah.
Or maybe people just don't want to lose all of their blood.
I mean, I guess, if that's what you're into.
I learned a lot of this information. I want to give a shout out to this other podcast called Cast of Wonders. I was going to mention to you this. Wow. Mention this to you earlier this week, but I wanted to leave it till now. It's actually a storytelling podcast. Yeah.
Are you serious?
Where there is a host who introduces a narrator who then reads a story about anything. In this case, it was the Langsuir. It's usually about like folklore or like historic retellings of events and stuff. I do highly recommend this podcast. That's where I learned most of this information. And this story also talks about how the creature has had a significant effect on people living in Malaysia throughout time, from the creature's origins to now, essentially. And if you want to watch a movie about the Long Year, there is a Malaysian movie released in 2018 that has a little more than 5 out of 10 stars on IMDb.
Oh, a little more than 5 out of 10.
I did not watch a clip. I did not watch a trailer, but I read one of the 2 reviews on IMDb.
Mm-hmm.
And this person talked about how there was a scene with terrible acting where the men were just waving their arms around, panicking, and not doing anything to help any of the people. That sounds about right.
I was gonna say, what? I don't see why that's bad. That sounds like normal life.
Right.
That's what men do most of the time. That's what men do.
So I just have a few more vampire adjacent things that I want to mention. I'm definitely not going to go into as much detail, but we also have The Leak, which is a Balinese myth about a floating or flying head with their entrails hanging around.
You know that picture for any time. You know that picture of the toilet, and it says there's a leak in the toilet.
Oh yeah.
And it's just a picture of
It's a
the
picture of a
leak on
leak.
top of the toilet. That's where my brain went. Sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
I like disembodied heads better though.
These floating heads are humans who have been affected or like entranced by, the English translation is black magic,
Mm-hmm.
and have been induced to cannibalize to stay alive. They love to eat and drink blood from newborn babies. They're typically
Again.
seen as humans during the day, but then they get freaky at night. We also have the
Me too.
Penanggalan. Hold on, I'm trying to remember the pronunciation. We have the Penanggalan, whatever, which is another floating woman's head that preys on pregnant ladies, babies, or young children. Like the Leak, the Penanggalan is a witch that practices magic and has become capable of separating her head and entrails from the rest of her body by soaking in vinegar. Like soaking her body in vinegar so that it shrivels up and it can just pop off and fly around.
Why can't I do that?
And then to return, she soaks back in vinegar to shrink up and slide back into her body.
That's how I would travel. I would just be like, oh, I gotta go to the grocery store. And then I would.
Let me do my vinegar soak.
And then I would, just hop in the bathroom when I got there, do another vinegar soak, get my shopping. I'd have to have a special bag made so that I could carry it with my teeth when I pop the rest of my body back off.
Goes over your head.
Yeah.
The Penanggalan's whole flying around deal, that can be read about in the Hikayat Abdullah. I didn't even try to read that shit. It is long. But one thing I learned about the Penanggalan, they typically, in their human form, employ themselves as midwives so they can be closer to birthing blood and newborns.
Oh.
And
I mean, smart.
Yeah, you're right.
It's good business practices,
I also want to talk about the Mandarugo, a woman by day that turns into something more nefarious and bloodthirsty by night. Vampire-esque, they love to feast on men's blood and would go so far as to marry a man just to use him for feed. That is not a head with entrails, I believe. I actually think the Mandarugo is like a variation of the Aswang, but is like more specifically described as feeding on the blood of men. Another way to explain how women are terrible and destroy men. They suck the life out of them.
Hey, some men like being destroyed by women.
You're so right. So all of these things very clearly have a common theme, and that they're all women.
And it's fuck women.
They're all women, literally all women. So I took some notes when I was listening to you talk in the last episode about the common theme of eating children, these women shapeshifters who desire to eat children or drink their blood or enact some kind of revenge on men or drink men's blood.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to talk a little bit.
Seduce men.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk more about that and how women are consistently depicted as these devices to apply blame
Mm-hmm.
and victimize men as a way to
Mm-hmm.
explain, like, why did these terrible things happen? Oh, it's because of this evil woman spirit enacting her revenge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are women always blamed? That's a question I ask myself every day. One note that I took is, why is being a witch such a bad thing?
Because it's anti-patriarchy, anti-capitalism. Duh.
Because it's giving women the power,
Mm-hmm.
and how men and men apologists
Mm-hmm.
don't want to give up that power. They will give any sort of explanation, any sort of accusation, and once again sensationalize them to become something worse, or make them into something worse than they actually are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because God forbid a woman be capable or have agency of her own,
Mm-hmm.
even in 2024.
There has been a cross-cultural taboo against women and blaming
Mm-hmm.
them using magic and myth and
Mm-hmm.
spiritualism, and I don't like it.
Like, where did that stem from
Right,
originally? You know what I
right.
mean? Like, usually the collective conscience in the Jungian sense, like, there's often some kind of historical event or some linguistic connection or something that, like, oh, all mythologies have this thing in like all mythologies have a great flood because presumably there was a big ass flood at one point,
Mm-hmm.
like, what what happened that made all cultures be like, man, fuck women.
Some great things to think about. Women suck,
Yep.
and sometimes they have to get fucked up in order for men to be okay. End of story.
A woman's place is in the kitchen.
Not me, bitch. That shit, it's hot in there. I'm sweaty.
Cool. Well, that's depressing.
It's really depressing.
You know what, though? Buffy makes it all better.
It really does. We love Buffy.
Buffy said, fuck that and fuck you.
Well, that concludes this week's broadcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you wish to stay in touch, reach out to us at broadcastfromthebelfry@gmail.com or stalk us on Instagram at broadcastfromthebelfry. Again, I hope you've enjoyed our little show. Please rate and review. And until next week, stay spooky.